What's up, guys? So today I'm going to actually walk us through doing some paper piecing, and mainly because the video that's coming after this is foundation paper piecing heavy, and so I just want to do a nice, easy, quick tutorial showing how to do one block of foundation paper piecing. So the first thing I'm going to talk about are the tools to paper piece. You're going to need some fabric. I've chosen 4 colors, and in a moment I'm going to iron these all out. I have a light pad. You do not have to have one. If you get a light pad, this is the Caterpillar Glow. This is the first edition. That's as bright as this one gets. I don't suggest it. They make a newer edition that has to remain plugged in. This one here travels, so I can unplug it, move it around. But the other one is just so much brighter, and it's bigger, and I think it's a better buy for this. And this has the self-healing cutting mat on top of it. But I like them, but this one is not the best one they make. They make a bigger one and one that's brighter. So I suggest you get that. And that one has 3 different settings, but it still doesn't get as bright as you need when you're using regular paper. I like to use papers for foundation piecing. It goes through your printer, and they're much more thin than this paper here. You can see the difference. This is regular Staples copy paper. This is the foundations paper. Even if you were printing it at Staples, I would take them this paper to print on, just because it's thin. It's going to be easier in every way. It's just going to make your life easier. I like a dull blade because you are going to dull your blade. This blade is going to be trash after I finish cutting with paper. You guys know about scissors and paper, and you ought not do that. So this one is specifically for this. After I finish this project, I'm going to toss it. They make a ruler called Add a Quarter ruler, and they have an Add an Eighth. Then they have like an Add an Eighth Plus, which is cool. I think it's best to get the new version of this ruler. I don't know why in the very first version they didn't do this, but hey, you live and you learn. And the issue is this ruler here is super thick right here. The new one is thin. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's paper thin. It tapers down, and you want the one that tapers down. For this project, I'm going to use the Add a Quarter, even though in this area here, the Add an Eighth might be nice because it's a little bit smaller, but I'm going to go ahead and just use one ruler for the entire project. And this one is the new one. The old one is yellow, and it has that big, thick lip on it. And you really don't want that big, thick lip. You want the nice, thin, tapered one. And you should not iron this as you go, but you're going to need to do some type of ironing or finger pressing. And so I like to use the Violet Craft roller. The reason why I like this one is because it's heavy. They make some that are super light, and you guys know I have the wood one that I'm constantly using, which I could use here too, but I like this guy because it's so heavy. And I think that's it. So let me go on ahead and iron out this fabric, and then I will be right back. Okay, I have ironed up my fabric. And now I just want to run through exactly what foundation paper piecing is, also known as FPP. F is in Frank, P is in Paul, P is in Paul. FPP. Basically, you take some fabric, you put it on the paper, you sew on one of these lines, you cut everything down, and then you go on ahead and rip the paper out. One of the things you really need to remember that gets a little tricky is that the very first square that you put down, and it's numbered for you. The very first one you put down, number 1, needs to be facing outward. If you can figure that out, then you can do this. This is just, it's not as difficult as people think. It's not everybody's favorite. I don't even know that it's my favorite, but you know, it works. Make sure that it is facing outward. Then you cut everything down, you rip the paper out, and that's basically what it is. And it's called foundation because you're sewing onto a foundation. So let's get started. I forgot to tell you guys, the reason why I have this one printed on white paper and this one printed on foundation paper is I am the queen of wasting fabric, and this particular method of piecing does have a tendency to waste a lot of fabric, especially if you do it like me. But if you'd like to be more precise and actually cut down pieces of fabric that are very close to the size that you need, this is a great way to do it. And I can cut these numbers out and then cut the fabric pieces and get ready to just cook with gas. You just start, it moves faster and you just don't waste as much fabric. So I'm actually going to do that for this particular, for this template. Okay. This template is by Anna Politzer, Six White Horses Studio. And this is made to make a star. And I'm going to need 4 of these pieces of paper, 4 of each of these, to go on ahead and make the entire block. So I have printed out 4 pieces of paper. And we are going to get to piecing these. This should be actually a pretty quick piece for me. Once you get going, it really doesn't take forever, especially if you prep it properly. And I'm going to do that as far as cutting these pieces out prior to just jumping into it. So I'm going to start that now. For these, just go on ahead and cut out the pieces that you see. And make sure that you are including at least a 1/4 inch. Try to do it really a 1/2 inch around all the sides of fabric. You cut the pieces on the line, no big deal, but when you're cutting the fabric, try to cut at least a 1/2 inch so that you can be comfortable. You don't want to be skimping for a project like this, because seam ripping is a pain in the patootie. And so the less seam ripping we have to do, obviously, the better. So let's just go on ahead and make sure that we have enough fabric. So you see here, I'm doing about a 1/2 inch. I'm kind of just loosely cutting it. I'm not being exact. And that is just to make sure that I was cutting on the fold right there. Okay, guys, let's get into this. This is what the block looks like. I forgot to tell you guys, I really like to keep a glue stick around. I just keep that in my sewing kit all the time. Never know when you're going to need this. This is that fabric glue stick. It washes out. And I also like to have a different ruler. The other ruler will work just fine, this one here, but for whatever reason, I like my creative grids. This is a 2.5 by 12.5. All right, so this is the actual foundation that we'll be working on. I cut up one here so that I could just mark out what every color was going to be and make sure that the fabric pieces were larger. Now you can cut the fabric pieces way smaller than I have, but I like to be comfortable in my foundation paper piecing, so the fabric pieces are a little larger than necessary. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is cut apart the A and the B. If you guys can see, there is a shadow around, and sometimes you'll see a dotted line as opposed to that shadow, but I'll get you closer. Now when you copy this on a copy machine, you're going to need to change your settings, otherwise you really will not be able to see it very well. Like here, you can't really see that there's a shadow around, but here you can clearly see it. And a lot of times that's a dotted line that lets you know that that's where you're going to cut. So I'm going to rough cut around that gray shadow. I'm just cutting the 2 pieces apart roughly, not on the line, just roughly around it. And then I'm going to grab my paper scissors that I keep in the sewing room too, and I'm just going to, like I said, rough cut around this to make it more manageable. So I'm going to start with the B piece, no rhyme or reason, I just am. And I'm going to grab number 1. So these are all numbered, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Each piece is going to take 7 different stitches. So this is my piece 1. And I'm making sure this is fabric that has an actual right and wrong side. We're going to make sure that for this, the very first piece, the right side is facing the mat. And I'm just going to be sure, and I'm placing it on here diagonal because this is the longest area and I need to cover all of that number 1 in addition to the 1/4 inch line there. You want all of it plus. And I'm just going to fasten it there with a little of this glue. When you use this glue, you make sure to put the glue on the fabric, not on the paper. So I just did a little stripe there. I'm staying away from the number 2 because I need to pull that back to expose it. So we are just going to grab this and spin it around. I'm right-handed. And I'm going to use my trusty ruler here, and I'm going to fold this back on the number between the line between 1 and 2. Fold it back. And I'm going to be sure that I get right up next to that ruler and just give it a nice crease. Now I can see that I have all this fabric left over. I'm going to go on ahead and trim that away. Don't be scared. It takes some confidence, but hopefully you have just a touch of extra fabric sitting around. So the first thing that you're going to do is sew 1 to 2. So I'm going to look for piece number 2, and that's going to be this black piece right here. And I can barely see it because of the light. And we'll grab this. Now, number 2, I need the fabric to cover all of number 2 in addition to that that 1/4 inch mark there. I can tell that it can easily do that from the front, but how do you do that from the back? Well, a few things. I can fold, I've already folded on that line, but we can fold on the other line that's touching it. And you can fold on this line that's also touching it. So you can see where all of the lines are. Okay, so I need to sew between 1 and 2, so I'm going to fold it on that line there. I'm going to take my fabric. Now this is where the light box is supposed to come in handy, and it will if it's bright enough. This one honestly just isn't. But when you fold it back, let me see if I can get a little closer here, and even more close. When you fold it back, I can see the shape through this light. It's this right here. And this is the trick to foundation paper piecing. When you fold this shape backward, you should be able to see that the fabric covers it completely, everything that you need. Here's the 1/4 inch mark right here. Here's where the piece starts. Here's where it ends. The fabric that I need to sew needs to cover all of that. So I'm going to take this black and I'm going to slide it underneath, and I'm going to be sure to line this up, preferably so that it lines up as close to with the 1/4 inch mark as I can. And then I want to make sure that there's black fabric over here, there's black fabric over here, and there's black fabric underneath, so that I know that I'm covering that entire piece. When you fold it backward, you want to be sure that that always happens. If that happens, you're golden. You're good. So now we're going to take it to the sewing machine. We're going to leave it like that. Some people pin it. I don't need to. And we're going to sew right on that line between the 1 and the 2. Now, if you don't have that light, you should be able to hold it up to the light and still see that that fabric is covering it. So now I'm just going to line it up here. And I've shortened my stitch length. It's really important that you shorten your stitch length. I shortened mine to a 1.5. The reason why we do that is because we need to perforate the paper so that we can rip it out later. I like to start sewing in the 1/4 of an inch over there. Go on ahead and go a couple of stitches past. That's one of the secrets to this too. Do not be scared to sew in this 1/4 of an inch area here. I've hand cranked the needle down just so that I can tell where it's going to be. And I actually don't love that, so we're going to crank it over a little bit more. I'm going to drop this. This is a strange angle to be sewing this for me, so we're going to see if I can get close. There we go. And then we're just going to take our time and sew on the line. I'm using black thread to piece with because it was in the machine and I didn't feel like changing it. And I've sewn 2 stitches past, and now I'm going to cut my thread and lift my foot, and let's see if I've sewed on the line. Look at that. All right, she sewed on the line today. All right, now let's take it back over to the other area. Okay, so now we've just sewn on the line. I'm going to flip this over, and it looks like nothing right now. It looks strange, and I am going to rock this and pull it taut up against those stitches. I want to be sure that I'm pulling it all the way up against those stitches, so I'm just kind of finger pressing it. I'm going to grab my roller, and I'm going to give it a good roll so that it goes ahead and lays down pretty nice and flat. Okay, now that we see that it's nice and flat, we're going to flip it back over and move on to the next number. Now this is kind of weird because we've got 2 and 3 way far away from each other. 2 is way over here and 3 is way over here. But we're going to sew on the line that's closest between 1 and 3. And we're going to sew all the way up that line. All right, do you see that? We're going to sew all the way between the 1 and the 3. So in order to do that, we're going to grab our ruler and we're going to fold it back so we can see where we need to be going. And don't worry about those stitches where I stitched over into the 3 area. It's just going to rip up. Not a big deal. I'm going to flip this and we're going to use the 1/4 inch side that butts up against the fabric. It locks. And we're going to trim away the excess. Some people do this after stitching. I do it before because it helps me to line up my piece. Either way is fine. So I'm going to grab a number 3, and this piece is large, but no worries. And I'm going to place it so that I can see where 3 is, and I can clearly see right here where the 3 is. And I'm just going to place this a 1/4 inch away from here. And then we're going to sew on the 3. Let's do it. Okay, so now I am going to roll this fabric back the same way we did before. We'll just move it this way. And we'll just roll it back against there. And just finger press it a little bit and then give it a nice little roll. And so we've sewn 1, 2, and 3. And so now we're going to look for 4. 4 is up here away from everything. So I'm going to turn it so that I can fold it on that 4 so that I can see exactly where it is I'm going. And you see you get into a little rhythm and it's just nice and easy and clean. And I'm going to cut off that excess. And then we're going to go on ahead and grab our number 4 color. This is a big piece, but hey, at least I know I'm covering it. I've got some selvage there. I'm going to put the selvage closest to me so that I'm sure that I am not catching any of it. And I'm going to just place this up near the 1/4 inch, which I love doing. And we're going to go sew on the line again. Okay, so we've sewn a little bit above here all the way through 4. 4 passes 2 and 3, but it stops right there at 5. I could have gone over a few stitches, but I didn't. But you're going to sew all the way through there. Now we're going to take piece number 4 and roll it back and expose what we have. And isn't that nice and pretty and clean? I mean, you can't really see where it's going just yet, but you know it's doing something. Now we're going to go to 5, which is over here. And I'm going to grab one of these pieces up here from number 5 and just be sure that it does indeed fit, and it does. And I'm going to fold back here on the 5 to expose what we have. And we see we have some fabric from up here too. And we are going to, we have some fabric from up here, and now we're going to go on ahead and clip this on, bump it right up against that, and cut off our excess. These are scraps or trash, depends upon who you ask. And then for number 5, I can see it here. I've got to make sure that this piece gets covered, and I can see that we're good. It's definitely long enough, and I know that it's deep enough here because the 5 stops right there. Now I'm going to sew the line. Okay, so I have sewn this line. I jumped a bit above in this 7, not a big deal, and then I came on through down into the 1/4 inch line. No worries. Let's flip this and pull it taut and smooth it out with our fingers and give it a nice roll with this here. Make it nice and flat. And we're going to find 6. Between 5 and 6 is where we're sewing now. It's basically sew by numbers. You know, paint by numbers. This is sew by numbers. Flip it back. Line this up with it so that it butts right up. Cut off the excess. Grab my number 6 piece, which is up and over here. And this is going to be an interesting one because you can see this angle and you're like, how do I put it? Do I put it straight? No. Watch how I put this, how I angle this. I can see that number 6 is this right here. You probably can't see it, but I'll darken it with this pencil. That is not a straight line. That's nowhere near a straight line, but that's number 6. Plus you want to do your 1/4 inch here and your 1/4 inch there. Okay? You want that to come all the way down here. So I'm going to take this. I know that this fabric is big enough to cover it all, but how am I going to get it to do so? That's right, I'm going to put it on an angle. Right sides need to be facing for this. The only first one is the one that faces down. Everything else is right sides together. So now I'm just going to angle this so that I get everything that I need and I can see that I am. And if I can see that this, can you guys see that? I don't know if this is picking up the light, but I can see through this paper that this is where the blue comes. The blue comes all the way down here, back up there. So I've got plenty of fabric on both sides. I've got it skewed, but that's okay because I'm catching everything that I need to catch. Okay, so now this is what it looks like. Because I had the overhang, I am going to have to trim this when I fold it back. You see all that overhang there? I am going to have to trim that off. No worries. And now I'm going to flip this backward. And I can see that it covers everything that I needed it to cover. I kind of overestimated where that 6th one was. Don't worry about this over here. This is just where it needs to be. And I am going to roll, roll, roll. And you can see that this is where that gap is, but this is where the 6th line ended. So I overshot quite a bit. For this piece, because it's flappy and loose, I like to hit it with a little bit of glue when the paper is up facing me so I can kind of see where it goes. And I like it to kind of go off and hold it really well like that. Perfect. Now we're going to grab piece number 7, which is the last piece that we need to sew. We're going to fold it back on that line between 7, 4, 5, and 6. I know it's kind of confusing, but when you see it in person, you're like, oh, I know where to go. And I am just ripping those stitches right there. Not a problem, because we're going to sew right into that. And we are going to cut off the excess. And we're going to grab our piece number 7, which is a large piece. And we are going to make sure that they are right sides up because we want right sides facing. And I'm going to go on ahead and put this just like this at the edge so that it lines up with the 1/4 inch for this. And I can clearly tell that this piece of fabric is way larger. I could probably get 2 of these in that, but it's just how I cut my fabric. So now I'm going to sew the line and finish this up. Okay, so I went ahead and sewed that 7, and I started way off in the 1/4 inch gusset, and I came off way off in the 1/4 inch gusset. No worries. That's actually good because it'll help keep the fabric all taut. So now I'm just going to pull up against this just a little bit and roll this back, and then I'm going to hit it with this roller. Let's do some rolling, rolling, rolling. And then I'm going to flip it up so that the paper is facing me. I'm going to put a little glue on this here and here. And again, I kind of want it to go off so that I get that glue all the way to the edge. There we go. And just smooth it out. Smooth it, smooth it. And then I'm going to go around this and trim off the gray. I'm not going to trim off the gray. I'm sorry, that's wrong. I'm going to trim off the white So you see the gray, I'm going to trim the white so that there's a 1/4 inch from that really strong dark line there. I've got my ruler, and here it's cloudy on the 1/4 inch side. So I'm just going to put that 1/4 inch mark right down there and follow the line. Here we are. We're just going to cut, and then we are going to rotate. There's a little short cut right here, and you need to be sure to cut it just the way that it is. Don't try to make it your own way. Just cut off usually what's the dotted line. Remember when we were younger, we learned to cut on the dotted line? I'm going to put this 1/4 inch line on that strong black line there, and then I'm going to just take off the excess. Perfect. Turn it again. Take off that little tip. It's going to be a weird shape. You would think that I would be going to like a perfect triangle point, but I'm not. And we're going to turn it one more time. And we are going to cut off that white excess. And when I flip it over, look what we have. Gorgeous, gorgeous. And these aren't all flapping away from the paper. So I'm going to do the same thing, the same exact thing, except for the mirrored part on A. What happens when you're going too fast? Of course, I made a mistake. So instead of sewing on the 1 and 2, I sewed on the 2 and the 4. So right here is where we're going to have an issue. It should be a much steeper line here. So what am I going to do? You've got a few options. I can totally scrap this, take a photocopy and recut it out and start over again. Or if you don't have that option, you can seam rip this. And if you're going to seam rip it, the way that I like to do it is go down here and open this up so that you see a few of these stitches, and just grab a couple and just pull out a few. And as you keep going, you just keep pulling and pulling and pulling. Don't glide this in there or anything like that. Just go slow and pick your stitches. Okay, so I chose to go on ahead and seam rip it. Another tool that you might want to have in your arsenal would be some tweezers. And I love these tweezers. I think these are Tulip Pink tweezers. And I just go ahead and pick these, pick them out. Pick them out, pull them out, and clean this bad boy up. And we will start over, sort of. I'm going to pick up, well, yeah, because the issue is between 1 and 2, so I'm definitely going to have to start over. If your paper gets torn, which it might because you've perforated it quite a bit because you have your stitch on like a 1.5, 1.6, which is super small enough to perforate, but not so small that you can't pick your stitches. Oh, I do have a tear. Let me go grab some transparent tape and I'll show you how to mend that. Okay, so I grabbed a couple of pieces of tape. This is just clear, transparent Scotch tape, and I'm putting it right over that line, and then I'm just gonna smooth it out, and no one will ever be the wiser. I brought 2 pieces of tape, I don't know why, but we'll just tape over this one too, and it doesn't cause an issue with your sewing machine or anything like that. It'll be fine. All right. Let's start over. Well, I don't know that I'm going to... Yeah, we're pretty much starting over. No worries. Let's do it. So this is going to be 2. Fold it backward. Crease it. Cut off the excess. And let's go. Okay, so we've got our piece A here, and we've got our piece B here, and we're just going to butt them up together. And you see how this kind of comes down, and it matches right here, and it matches right there. That looks good. We're going to right sides together. All right, we're going to just try to line it up the best we can. Line it up. And it's a little funky. There we go. And then I'm just going to sew right down this 1/4 inch line right here. Let's do it. Okay, so I sewed down that line, and I'm close on the back. It's not perfect, but don't worry, this is a pretty forgiving pattern in that sense. So we're going to open it up, and look, that guy is where it needs to be. That's what I was most concerned about right there. Okay, so now we just need to do this 3 more times. Pretty good. Looks pretty good. And then we'll open this up. Move that to the right. So let's open this one up this way, so we can nest those seams. It's just good behavior, just good manners. And we will move that one. Not as perfect, but when have I ever made anything perfect? We'll make these nests and sew down here. Let's see what she got. Alright. It's alright. Perfect. It ain't. Is it close? Am I going to take it? It's just a little bit right here. It's off just a touch. Am I going to allow for it? I am. Now, once you get all of this done, then you got to rip all these papers out, which is my least favorite part. Oh gosh, I don't love it. I do not love ripping paper out, but it's just a part of the process, which is why I cannot wait to talk about easy piecing. But anyway, that's this. I'm going to start ripping papers out. You don't want to rip them out until everything that you're going to do has been sewn. So everything that I'm going to do has been sewn at this point. I think I'm going to turn this into a mug rug. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And then whatever. So I won't be sewing anything else on the sides. But if you were doing this and you are still going to attach more blocks, then you would leave the papers on the side that you would be attaching more blocks to. All right, let's get to ripping. How do you rip it? Just as simple, just like that. People sit in front of the TV and do their ripping, and you just rip it. Rip it good. And there's the glue on some of these pieces, which is not a big deal. I try to get as much paper off as I can. All the paper doesn't always come off. I don't care. It's not that serious to me at all. So just rip the pieces of paper out. I like to use my tweezers, but I'm just going to pull this out. Not a big deal. Well, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with this block, and it's a good size block. It's 11.5 by 11.5 once you square it up. And I was like, what do I want to do? Do I want to make it into a quilt? Do I want to make it into a mug rug, which is where I thought I was going to go with this? However, I was like, how about we make a little pillow? Turns out my new favorite thing in this world are tiny pillows. Like, this is the cutest thing ever. I've decided to keep it in my car, and I want to make a bunch of them to match. I love a nicely dressed bed with a ton of pillows on it and that kind of thing. And it turns out Your car looks super cute if you put little pillows where people would sit. I don't know why, but it's the cutest thing ever, so we're going with it. So I grabbed a fat quarter out of my stash and I pressed it and I put them right sides together. I sewed a 1/2 inch around the entire, well, just about the entire thing. I left a hole to turn. I left about a 3-inch gap right here to turn it. And you saw I just clipped the corners to make turning easier. You guys, this little guy is such a cutie patootie. So yeah, I just grabbed a fat quarter, put right sides together, sewed around most of it with a 1/2 inch seam, and then I grabbed some of this polyfill that I had left over from, I don't know, whatever I made with polyfill. I can't think of whatever that could have been at this point, but apparently I had some polyfill. And I thought that was going to be enough. Oh, that puff quilt, that's right. I thought that was going to be enough, but it wasn't. So I grabbed some batting and I stuffed it in there too. And then I closed it up with a ladder stitch. And it's a cutie patootie. You guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope to see you guys really, really soon. Bye-bye.